Charles H. Bernard, captain of the American sealing brig Nanina, had only the best of intentions. His aim was to ensure the survival of the people under his care. On June 11, 1813, Bernard and 4 other volunteers disembarked the anchored Nanina, climbed into a small boat and sailed about 10 miles from New Island to Beaver Island, both part of the Falkland Islands archipelago in the South Atlantic. Armed with knives, clubs, lances and guns, and with the assistance of Bernard's trusty dog Scent, the 5 men planned to kill birds and hogs and take them back to the Americans and British who remained on the Nanina and were fast running out of fresh provisions. But when the men sailed back to New Island late on June 14th, they were greeted with an alarming sight. The Nanina was gone. They had been cruelly abandoned at the beginning of a Falklands winter, with little to sustain them and no explanation why they had been left in such a horrendous predicament. For our viewers, could you give us a quick rundown of what your book is about? Who are the key players in the story, and where did you get the inspiration for Left 4 Dead?
Yeah, Left 4 Dead is basically a story about 3 ships that end up in the Falkland Islands during the War of 1812. There is an American sealing ship, which is heading down to the Falklands to kill seals and take their pelts and then sell them in China. There's a shipwrecked British brig that's coming from Australia, hoping to make it to London, but because of a drunken captain on board, they crash into Eagle Island or Speedwell Island today on the Falklands. And then there's a British warship, the HMS Nancy, and they don't all arrive at the same time. And essentially the story is one of humanitarianism and then sort of duplicity and treachery.
But I think one thing that stuck out with me was your opening author's note, where you said that none of them are especially noteworthy and did not change the course of history. So what drew you to write about such a uninteresting bunch of characters?
A lot of my books are about large themes like whaling in America or the China trade, things that have had a major impact on the course of American history. And I am an American citizen. A lot of my books focus on American history. And in those books, there are a lot of characters, everything from presidents to, business leaders to other people, individuals that made a mark on history because it's both interesting, they have interesting stories, but they're almost familiar to you. And I was looking around actually for a book like that, and I kept saying, nah, nah, nah. And then I came upon this story, and these are people who you might know. I mean, some of them were larger than life in their own little way, but none of them were major historical characters. They're people under times of great duress during the War of 1812 in a difficult environment, dealing with difficult situations. And what I found fascinating is it shows human nature, everything from the good to the bad and everything in between. And I could identify with it more almost. I don't know if I would survive. The will to live is very strong, but it's tough. There are 100 things that could have gone wrong.
The primary source of Captain Bernard's journals, the ones that you read.
One of them.
How did he write that at the time, in this environment? How did he keep track of the events going on? And to your knowledge, how accurate is the detail that he put into them?
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question. The way he talks about it in his journal, he basically got baby seal skins and made parchment like pages, and he used the quills of geese and soot or other materials to keep a rough, sort of almost a furry journal. That's what he talks about in his journal, because I wondered, how does he remember all this? But a couple of things, you have to keep in mind a couple of things. I believe that actually happened. But the thing is, when you're dealing with history, you're always dealing with people's perspectives. And it wasn't just his book. His comments aligned very well with the 2 logbooks that we have of 2 Americans up until the time that they're left alone on the island. For the time they're left alone on the island, we have to rely on Charles Barnard. And I made a decision. Am I going to rely on him or not? Well, it's the only document we have. I believe it's the case. Some of the little pieces of other information we have would tend to agree with this makes sense. But in the end, the fact is they survived for 534 days. It's not like they just sat there and said, oh, well, no problem, we'll survive. We don't have to do anything. I'm sure that the majority of the things that happened. Did they happen exactly in that way? Did Barnard paint himself a little bit in a brighter light than some of the other people? Possibly. You will never know. But before that, a lot of the book, more than half the book, takes place before that. And before that, there are multiple sources all telling you what happened. And they tend to agree in broad and sometimes very specific strokes as to what happened. Part of my goal as an historian is to tell a good story. Any historian who tells you they know exactly what happened is lying, because it's people have different perspectives and you're dealing with human beings. Yes, you can know that X, he died on this day at that moment. That's a fact. But exactly what happened in between, your goal as an historian, I think, is to tell the most accurate story you can given the materials you have. And I believe I've done that.